Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us and welcome to our Academy on Air here as we're going to talk about some things related to audience strategy. My name is Ivana and I'm an agency account strategist here at Google.
And my name is Marco, and I'm also an agency account strategist on another team here at Google. And we're really excited to talk to you today about how to identify your audience and profile those users to put together better targeting. And just to give you a little bit of a preview for what's coming next, this is the first of a three-part series. So we'll be focusing today on how to identify your users, as I'd mentioned. But in the next couple weeks at this same time, we'll be talking about how to re-engage those users who are often some of your most valuable possible customers, and then also expand on that targeting so you're moving towards other users who look like your customers and may be very valuable as well.
Great. So the reason why we're talking about audience more and more so today is because the consumer journey has changed quite a bit than what it used to look like in the previous years. People are searching across different devices or looking at different during different times of the day. So there's a lot of different touch points when they're thinking about making a purchase or doing something that involves far more research. So one of the examples that we have here is someone who might be thinking about planning a trip. Maybe they initially had watched a rainforest documentary and felt inspired. Then they started doing a little bit more research, perhaps reading some blogs and trying to figure out some best destinations. So there is definitely a longer journey here from the point of, realizing that you want to take this trip to Puerto Rico, for instance, and then actually booking the flights, booking the hotels, and looking for the restaurants to dine at.
Yeah, and I think what Ivana is really getting at is how important it is to think about that entire journey. Because if you're, a travel site to Puerto Rico, you might not initially think of these people watching a documentary as your audience. But, after transitioning from device to device and point to point, they might actually become one of those purchasers. And I think that's also getting to what's so unique about digital, in that you can actually not rely on a proxy the way you might do on most traditional media. If you think about a TV ad, you have an expected audience in terms of age or in terms of gender, maybe interests, if you're lucky, who's going to be watching a certain TV show or who you expect to watch it. But with Google, you're actually relying on the real data of your customers, the sites that they're going to, what they're passionate about, as well as that demographic data.
Right. So now you don't necessarily need to make inferences about the group that you're targeting. You can use real-time data that is updated frequently, so you have an exact understanding of who you're going after.
Yeah, and so I want you to imagine a world where you can reach millions of potential customers, and not just who are, on their phones or who are on Google search at one time, but who are across different platforms, YouTube, Gmail, we'll get more into that, and different devices.
An important thing to add here is this is also the user's expectation, right? I no longer expect a one-size-fits-all message. When you're trying to reach me, I'm expecting something that is tailored to who I am and what I'm interested in. So consumers now have that expectation from marketers to provide that sort of tailored message.
Yeah, and to use that message, so when you're targeting these users with ads, they do have that expectation that they'll really be directly relevant based on that homework that you really need to be doing as an advertiser. So you can personalize to the customer, and depending on what their point is. If we think about that earlier example, an advertisement you're showing on tropical documentary videos going to be very different from the advertisement you want to show to someone who's on the Google search network, or even that same person now that they're on the Google search network and they're looking for trips to Puerto Rico.
Yeah, we'll touch on this a little bit later, but once we talk about how to identify different audiences, we'll bake that into how we're thinking about the marketing funnel in terms of upper funnel, mid funnel, and also lower funnel.
Yeah, and here, this is one of our favorite stats here at Google. So our display network does reach over 95% of global internet users. And we enable our advertisers to engage with users not just on a single format, but on, for example, Gmail, YouTube, Google Play, each of which have over 1 billion users a month.
Right, and this reach is quite expansive. So in addition to Google's own properties, we also partner with over 2 million different websites, as well as another over 1 million app publishers. So it's pretty insane.
Yeah, so pretty amazing reach to allow you to connect with your customers and your potential customers as we think about not only identifying your audience, but also using that data to do even more with your marketing. And you can connect with people throughout their journeys, throughout what they're doing online, to really personalize and connect.
Don't need to stress it any more further, but again, the signals do happen in real time and they translate across different properties. So whatever insights you're gathering from browsing or search behavior on YouTube, you can repurpose for different product areas like Gmail or Google Play, as an example.
Yeah, and this is getting a bit ahead of ourselves, and we'll touch on this a little bit more later on in some of our other Hangouts. But we also have extremely powerful machine learning technology that is becoming more powerful all the time to use those real-time data signals that Ivana was talking about to really automatically personalize the ads and recognize who your customers are and where individuals are at, again, in your funnel or in their decision-making process.
Exactly. And we don't want to be just two other strangers here presenting to you through the camera. So if you go over to the next slide.
Yeah, so I gave you a little bit of a hint at it there. But here is myself, Marco.
Yay, meet Marco.
And you can see some information about just me that you might get from an initial look at who I am without knowing anything about me. And there you see my age. You can pick up where I live. And this is the kind of data that you might be able to do with traditional. Certainly, you can send out mailers to people who are in the city of San Francisco and only take advantage of your customers who are in that city. But if you think about myself, or in a little bit more, if I tell you more about myself, what are my interests? Well, first of all, I'm an avid reader. Runs in my family. My mom's a librarian. You see me here. I had to send her this photo when I was in Spain. This is with a statue of Don Quixote in Madrid. So if you think about that as my user behavior, I like to browse blogs. What am I going to read next? If we want to think about some things that might be more actionable to an advertiser, I'm very passionate about exercise. So I watch a lot of YouTube videos to help me learn new workout routines. I also have family, as maybe this is hinting at as well, spread across 3 continents. So some family in South America, in Europe, and that definitely informs some of my bigger purchases, like where I'm going to go for flights. And you wouldn't know that I generally go to South America for Christmas if you didn't have that deeper understanding of who I am. And I'll let you pass it off.
It's only fair if I talk about myself as well. So, hey again, I'm Ivana. At face value, I am a 26-year-old woman living in San Francisco. So that might be all that you're able to tell about me. But if you go beneath the surface, a little bit more about myself. I too, like Marco, love to travel. I actually have my dad's side of the family lives in South America, in Peru specifically. So I have definitely been looking at flights to go down there since 3 of my cousins are getting married this year alone. In addition to that, I also joined a volleyball league recently up in the city, and I'm also thinking about redecorating my bedroom. So in terms of what that translates into with my online search behavior, I'm constantly looking at flight deals. I also started baking recently, and I'm cooking home at more now. So I'm looking at a lot of recipes, definitely filling my pantry with a lot of ingredients and the sort of equipment that I need for my kitchen. On YouTube, I am still very much inspired by a lot of beauty and fashion influencers out there. So I'm constantly watching YouTube videos about that, and that's informing a lot of my decisions when I'm thinking about what I want to wear or what sort of makeup I want to buy. I think another thing to note too is, even with all this online behavior, I am an incredibly indecisive shopper. I love to do my research online, but I do prefer to go buy in store because I just like that immediate gratification. So as a marketer, what this means for you is you would want to think about your omni-channel approach, right? How do you target people like myself who do all this online, but then ultimately convert in your stores?
Yeah.
So.
Very interesting you've taken out baking. I feel like sometimes Google makes it very easy for us to never cook. So that's something that, I never would have guessed either. So
very
that shows
therapeutic.
The value of deeper insights. So going on, you don't want to, as you're getting this data about your customers, you're starting to understand who they are better. Of course, you don't want to miss your opportunity to expand out that reach, sort of broaden your funnel, as we will talk about, and really find new customers. And so that personalization, that information you have on the people who are already, people who are passionate about your product, who are customers, really helps you inform you on who is most likely to go ahead and become another customer.
Precisely. So we're really driving home the why now, but we want to also tie this into the bigger picture. So again, to Marco's point, having all these audience insights allows you to, seek out folks who perhaps were not initially in your targeting plan, but would make a lot of sense as prospective potential clients. The other thing too is being able to re-engage with people who have, purchased with you before or might sit higher in the loyalty programs, and so you would want to value them more. And obviously being able to tailor your message to go after folks who provide more value to you, and we'll touch on that in a later section. So you will want to tune in again on Thursday when we talk more about the re-engage part of this strategy.
Yeah, definitely. And like Ivana said, we don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but we'll definitely often see customers using these different lists when you think about the actual strategy as they're starting to plan that next part, which would be their targeting. So we'll get in now to our next section, which is just a little bit more detail. We'll go into a little bit more about the specifics of AdWords and how you can actually use our platform to identify and start to put together those target audiences.
So how many of you know who John Wanamaker is? Wanamaker? I may have very well butchered that. Well, evidently, he is an entrepreneur who is coined the pioneer of marketing. This is one of his most famous quotes. "Half the money I spend on advertising is useless. The trouble is, I don't know which half."
Yeah, and hopefully what we'll be able to do is help you identify not just the half that's useless, but the half that is extremely useful, and try to build on that with Google. And this goes to, we've talked a little bit, or we've hinted at this, but what do we actually mean when we talk about audience signals? Well, we mean who they are, and hopefully those slides that we saw you earlier on ourselves gave you some insight on that. Also, where they are. Most of the time I'm either in San Francisco or in Mountain View for work, but what if I'm actually in Europe at the time? Then you want to be able to target me with the right ad for someone who's traveling, or for someone who is just looking for something in that geo. And then what they want. What are they looking for? And of course, search is an incredibly powerful way to do this, but it's by no means the only way. If you know what someone's behavior, you can look at the sites they've been to recently, or they've recently been to your site and added something to their shopping cart. They may still want what you have to offer, even if they're not on your site right now.
Yeah, and that's exactly why it's so important to differentiate between someone who's interested versus someone who has very strong intent. So with these audience signals, you're able to do just that and segment out your audiences based on how likely they are to convert in the funnel. Keep in mind that the signals that you are able to get from our tools are based on real-time data from individual users. This is not based on a sample size and extrapolated. This is very much tied to the person who is visiting your site or doing a search relevant to your business.
Yeah, that's a really important point about the actual signals.
Yeah.
And how do you identify the most qualified audience? Here are just some examples of some questions that you might want to ask. So, you want to know what locations users are targeting. Should you invest more on mobile? Are people, maybe they're starting their journey there? And if you have, we'll get to this a little bit more later as well. Do you have the tracking capabilities where you really know? Do you know what your users are interested in? So I don't need to read through all of these, but some very good questions you want to ask.
Yeah, you definitely want to take a step back, right, and look at the full picture. I think not just looking at the data that you can see in AdWords, and we'll show you exactly where to find that in a little bit. But if you have an analytics account, take a look through there as well. There are a lot of very powerful reports that tell you about user behavior, where they're coming from, how they behave on your site. So these are a lot of things that can inform how you decide to structure your campaigns and how you decide to value the different customer segments.
Yeah, because no matter how good a job you're doing with AdWords, hopefully most of your traffic you're not paying for. It's people who have found out about you, maybe through paid, maybe through their friends. And you want to use that data also.
Right. And as you get to more advanced thinking about your strategy, being able to look beyond demographic signals or even interest signals, but baking that into customer segments where you factor in customer lifetime value is going to be extremely powerful if you're thinking about how you can be profitable on paid search and across other channels.
Yeah, and we kind of wanted to make this a little bit of a game, more for you to think. So we have some, let's say, stereotypes. Let's call them what they are.
Broad assumptions.
Broad assumptions. I like that. And we want you to think about these and think about, okay, so sports is a man's game. Here's the assumption that's listed here. So ask yourself, what percent of people, and these will be particular to mobile, would you expect who are searching for sporting equipment or relevant products are women or men? You can see we'll want you to do the same thing for a few of these, but hopefully you've got a guess for that. And now let's see.
We are watching you through the screen, so we hope you're playing along.
All right, and with that, what is the answer?
Surprise! 60% of sporting goods shoppers who engage with relevant YouTube content on mobile are actually female.
Yeah, and then another assumption that we often make, gaming is for kids. So what do we know, though, about gamers? They're starting to grow up and become adults. Have they stopped playing games? Are they still playing? What would you expect? And let's see what the answer is.
45% of video game searchers on mobile are 35%. Maybe this is a generation that grew up with the Nintendo 64? I don't know.
No, I was part of that generation myself.
I was too.
Very good video game system. I think it's still working.
Very fun. Yeah. Just got that old trick of blowing through the game right before you stick it in.
Exactly. And then we have yet another assumption that advertisers, people often make. So women are homemakers, or certainly, if not necessarily that, also women are the ones who are taking care of the household chores, who are likely to purchase those types of products.
Thinking about decorating, thinking about home goods.
Yeah, but
I would guess so. But I also put this presentation together, so I know that the answer is 40% of home goods searches on mobile are male. So that's still a pretty significant percentage, just a little less than half are looking for home goods.
Yeah, and I like this one because I will often see advertisers, again, without getting too much in the weeds, but they will make immediate assumptions and they'll write their ads specifically for females or even choose to just target females. And what my advice usually is to them is wait until you see your data. And that's going back to the fact that we get real-time data based on your users. And finally, the last one, we assume men buy cars, but let's think about when, people are looking for cars, those types of searches online. How many are men? How many are women? And let's see.
60%. Actually, the majority are going to be female looking on mobile devices.
Yeah, so hopefully that's clarified, not just these assumptions, but also why it's important to think about, your data and not just, what your beliefs are kind of going in before you've even started to collect it.
Yep, exactly. So to really drive this home, I think there are a lot of things to look at, a lot of different signals to pay attention to. But keep in mind the prioritization of what is truly important to you and your marketing campaign. So here, your intent should always trump identity.
Yeah.
So if someone is further down the conversion funnel, they should mean more to you than someone who would maybe perhaps fit within that prospective audience.
Yeah.
Immediacy also trumps loyalty. So even if you have a lot of repeat customers who may likely come back again, they're not going to be as valuable as someone who is looking for something right now, right here. And you want to make sure that you're present and available to those users.
Exactly. Even if I always buy herbal essences, shampoo, if I have plenty at home, I'm probably not going to go buy it. But if I'm in dire need of shampoo because I'm traveling, I'll probably buy the first one I can find.
Yeah, exactly.
So then thinking about, that customer data, how it should drive your audience strategy. And we really have, a few parts here. So you want to use your knowledge of who your product is designed for. And even though we're talking about not making too much expectations, if you are designing a children's game, you probably want to focus on parents to some degree. So you do want to be aware of, who your product is really built for. You also, though, want to find customers who have already been to your site. So we'll find that maybe the single best signal is people who have visited you before and maybe who have visited certain parts of your site that really demonstrate intent. And then you'll also see there, just looking at the characteristics of your customers. So as you're seeing, not just showing to those same people, but people who maybe look like them, hopefully on as deep a level as possible when determining who else to target.
Exactly. So having a full view of prospective customers is going to increase the power of your audience solutions. That said, don't just look at the data that you see within AdWords or even in analytics. Take signals from your own website. If this is something that you're tracking, it's going to be equally powerful. Also look at your first-party data. You have customer lists. You know when people are coming, how often they're buying. Take a look at your customer details and try to make decisions based off of that.
Yeah, and I think, that this gets to the importance of tagging your site. This is something that, it's so important. We should almost, I think, be mentioning it at every single presentation because all this great data we're talking about, a couple of the reports that we'll get into later on or in later presentations, all of that, or at least almost all of it, is really only possible if you've done that groundwork you see here by tagging your full site.
Yeah, exactly. Make sure your conversion tracking code is working, your analytics code is working. Even within analytics, feel free you can build out more robust remarketing lists, which you can use later on, something we'll touch on again in the engagement section. But building out more robust remarketing lists based on different user behavior is going to be very powerful when you import that over into AdWords.
Yep. And, using these signals that you have, we have, intent signals about where someone goes on a site. Are they repeat visitors? Do they spend, like Ivana said, how much time on the site are they going? Are they viewing a certain number of pages? And that's really going to help you be as efficient as possible in your targeting.
Right. And again, data is refreshed in real time to ensure that you're going after the most relevant audience. So whether it's across different devices or platforms, we're going to show you intent versus, interest and help you prioritize effectively.
Yeah, exactly. And here, we just have, these examples of these people, we kind of thought they all had intent. And what do we see when we actually look at the data? A couple of these users, for whatever reason, actually are not exhibiting intent. So, more than 65% of users exhibit no in-market activity and this is a type of audience in market, but it's also just an example of user behavior where, most of the time when I'm thinking about a trip I'm going to take, for example, I don't end up taking the trip. And I do usually know within a few days that I'm not going to take it. Whereas other times, if I'm continuing to make searches relevant to that, that's probably a good sign that I do still have some intent.
Yeah. Exactly. And I think this is also going to mean more whether you are more of an e-commerce business or perhaps you're a lead generation business, in which case you don't want to go after the same users over and over again. If they've already filled out a form, they're not likely to come back and do that again. But if I've purchased something on your website, I may come back as a repeat customer. So as helpful as it is to go after audiences that are likely to purchase, it's also helpful with your audience signals to then, X out or kind of ignore customers and exclude customers who are not likely to be repeat customers. So you do save yourself some money and you're going to be more efficient with your campaigns.
Exactly. So here we have a really cool report example, Audience Insights, and we have just a screenshot of the kind of thing to give you how you would get to this, and in case you're paying attention from an AdWords account or familiar with how that works.
If you're logged into an AdWords account right now, this is how you're going to get to it.
Maybe on your other device, you're on AdWords. So you can go to your shared library and then go to one of your audiences. Maybe you want to start with your purchaser's audience, at least if it's large enough. That's often a great place to start. And that's where you can see this data. And we'll highlight a couple examples of the type of data that this can show.
Yeah, so just kind of repeating that, to go into the Audience Insights report, you're going to go into your AdWords account. If you're in the current user face, you're going to go into Shared Library, which is on the lower left-hand corner. Click into Audiences, and there you'll see a list of all your different audience lists. It should be in blue, in which case you can click into the ones that are perhaps lower down in the funnel. I think that'll give you the most accurate information about likely purchasers. So for example, click into your all converters list, and the first tab you're going to see is going to provide top insights broken down for your top in-market categories, top affinity categories, and then more basic demographic data like age and location, and gender. And then if you're interested in delving a little further, maybe you want to expand more into in-markets, you can click along the different tabs at the top to look through in-market, affinity, etc. So we can kind of go through an example here that we've pulled up on the screen.
Yeah. And one more just quick point to make. Don't worry if you're looking at the new UI. This is not rolled up yet. It is planned sometime this quarter to be included. Certainly will be included as that becomes the primary AdWords interface, but not to worry if you don't see it, and you will need to go into the old UI. But with that, let's continue. So this kind of goes back to that summary, some steps that you always want to take. So first of all, tagging absolutely everything. Yes. I think Ivana and I have hopefully hammered that point home, but really it is just an absolutely necessary first step. So you can make use of all this. Utilizing Google data. And the thing that makes that data so special is it is about your customers and it's in real time. And you can use those signals to identify either those same users who you want to come back to with nice personalized messaging or new users. And then using that customer data, not just from AdWords, but from your CRM, from broader analytics. So you can really have the full view of who your customer is.
Right. And again, with your first party data, tie that back into your omni-channel strategy if you do have brick and mortar stores in addition to selling online.
Yeah. All right. So what's our message here? Don't play a guessing game. Don't guess based on what you expect. Do think about what your product is and who your audience is, But more importantly, look at who's actually purchasing your product. One really cool example that's coming to mind for me here is Spikeball. I don't know if you're familiar.
Yeah, I've seen that in the
If you're
park.
not, if you guys aren't familiar with that, it's like a beach game where people will, I guess it's almost like grounded volleyball, where you're hitting a ball into this like trampoline. And it started as a children's game. I know I didn't do a great job explaining it, but you can probably imagine that children might like this game. Who has it actually become popular with? It's become popular with college students, with people, who are adults that like to go to the beach. They like to play that game. I saw a ton of people out on the 4th of July playing it. So don't play a guessing game. Use that data. And if you see that the people buying Spikeball are adults who are looking for a casual game to play with friends at the beach, start targeting adults. Don't rely on targeting children because you thought that was your audience.
And to that point, I mean, this probably applies to a certain number of businesses, but rather than thinking about your target demographic, think about who's going to be doing the research for them. So another example, my parents recently just purchased a car. They are not at all literate when it comes to anything online. So I have to do all the research for them, browsing Kelley Blue Book, looking through different dealerships in our area, even though I'm not the one going after a car, but it's really, it's ultimately my parents' decision. I am the one, though, online doing that sort of research for them.
Yeah, really good point. So here we have, another slide to think about identifying what kind of holistic marketing strategy really makes sense. And so what you'll see here is kind of that example of the purchase funnel. So you want to have a brand presence. You want to be, if you're a travel company, you want to be present maybe on things like YouTube videos about travel, about locations that match your specific niche. Then as you go down, you're eventually going to move into where people are more ready to be acquired, and think about what kind of messaging, now that someone's actually taking the time to research not just the environment in the rainforest, but actually looking at tours. That's going to be a very different user. And then finally, especially in e-com, customer loyalty becomes really, really important. Do you want to give people maybe 50% off if they bought gifts from you for the last 4 Christmases? Maybe it's worth having some kind of loyalty program.
Yeah, exactly. So I think this is a great segue as we then move on to the next section next week, talking about re-engage. But using this audience data, if we're able to couple it with machine learning and some of the more powerful tools that we have. We also recently rolled out some new products like smart display campaigns and responsive ads. So really leveraging both to make sure you're being smarter with data.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a good preview, but we don't want to get too far ahead, which brings us
spoilers
to
here.
The most important part of the presentation, the Q&A. So we'll have a look and see what questions we've got.
So hopefully, as you've been following along with the live stream, you've also been answering some questions. So we're going to pull that up now. And if you haven't had a chance, feel free, just pop in there, drop us a note.
All right, we're just seeing those.
And in true Murphy's Law, our Chromebook is struggling right now to connect to the internet.
Okay, looks like we are getting some questions that are starting to pop up. I think I saw a couple.
Let's see. Yes.
Okay, there we go. So I see the first question is from Jonathan, and he wants to know, when we build out similar audiences, are these also based on the audience insights that we see within the tool? And to some degree, you will see that your similar audience is probably going to have some of those similar interests, similar signals. But similar audiences are also built out in real time, and they're going to look at deeper behavior even than just interest. They're going to look at where people are going on your site, where they are on the internet, and basically build them out. In the case of search especially, it may be multiple times in a day that you're getting a new audience. Some of you may have noticed that those numbers tend to vary from time to time. And the reason for that is that the signals are, very, very real time. Whereas if you're thinking about what type of in-market for your audience, that still may change over time as new people are entering or leaving the list you're looking at, but it is going to be a little bit more consistent, which I think actually does make similar audiences really, really powerful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. Cool. So going down the list, we have a question here from Asim. And hey, Asim, your question is, where can we see the data on who is buying? So that's a really great question. If you're using your AdWords account, what you should do is use your conversion tracking code. So within the conversion tracking code, you're going to want to put this on the page that tracks the actual conversion. So for example, if you have an online store, I might go through all the different steps to buy something, add something to my cart, put in my payment information, and then I would land on perhaps like a thank you or a confirmation page. When you have the code on that page, that will track me as someone who has purchased something. So when you have the conversion code kind of built out, you'll see this within your audience lists. And again, that's available within your shared library. Within audiences, you'll have the data for people who have converted, and then you can use this and back into your whether you want to remarket back to me, right? So let's say, for example, I bought a pair of shoes on your website. I will fall into this converters list, and you could set the time frame, let's say for 30 days, because you don't want to keep me on the list for too long. But if I do fall in that list, you can create a campaign and basically try to sell other shoes to me, perhaps in different styles and other recommendations, maybe even offer me a discount because I was a previous purchaser. And you would do so by leveraging that converters list.
Yeah. So great question there. And I see another one from Adriana. What Google products would you recommend aside from Smart Display and responsive ads, specifically for mid to low funnel messages? So I would say, first of all, I love that Smart Display is one of the ones that you're pointing out. That's one of our newest products. And to some degree, if you are running Smart Display and if it's working and it's had time to generate data, then that really can be your main solution. That'll even take into account the list you're using on remarketing, as well as some of our other great mid-funnel solutions like similar audiences and in-market. Let's say, though, that you don't have quite enough data to build out Smart Display, or maybe you are using it, but you also want to have some additional targeting that gives you more control. The number one, especially lower funnel on display that we always recommend is remarketing. So remarketing is really, really powerful. And the more you can do where you're not just, as we've spoken about, using one list of everyone who's been to your site, but also looking at people who have been to your shopping cart, who on using analytics data have spent a certain amount of time on your site, that's really, really powerful. And then moving beyond that, similar audiences is a good place to start. Again, if you have the data similar to purchasers, probably stronger than similar to all visitors. And then, yeah.
Sorry, I don't want to cut you
No,
off,
go
but
ahead.
A couple other things to add here. So Marco touched on a lot of really great products and strategies for display. There's also a lot you can do within search if you're thinking about moving up to the mid-funnel. So what a lot of my clients will do is they'll obviously create non-branded campaigns where they use more generic terms to kind of go beyond just their brand, which is going to be the one really hitting home because these are the folks who have already heard your brand and are more likely to engage with you. Another thing to look at is dynamic search ads. So I don't know if you're familiar with dynamic search ads, but it's a great way to source new keywords and also to kind of make sure that you're reaching folks who might be searching for something that you haven't thought of to use as a keyword. So to touch on how dynamic search ads work, essentially it will dynamically crawl your website or the web pages that you designate for things that will match up with what people are searching for. So one example here, I might type in something like new homes in Los Angeles. And what dynamic search ads will do is it'll match my search query with content that is available on the web pages or category pages on your site that you've designated, and it'll dynamically generate an ad for me. So what's really great about that is it's a great way to tailor a message for someone where you can't necessarily anticipate what they would be searching for. So that's a good way to kind of move up the funnel. It's a great way to also source other keywords that you may not have thought of initially. Another thing to add is also Gmail ads. So if you want to run some ads on our Gmail product, which again has a pretty expansive reach, that's a great way to do so. And you can leverage a lot of existing audience insights to do that, whether it's going after in-market, which I believe may be available as a beta for Gmail ads, but certainly is something you can do. And you can also use keywords to kind of narrow down your targeting, as well as demographic data.
Yeah, so I think that was a really great way to build on that question. And certainly it's a conversation that we have pretty often, moving beyond search, or not moving beyond search, but moving to other areas of search where sometimes clients will really be solely thinking about as a lower funnel strategy. And search is very, very powerful in that way, but it can do even more. I did just want to touch on one more piece of that question because you'd mentioned responsive ads. I think even we're thinking about targeting, on display, if you had image ads, even still text ads, that's another really great way to target. Not all the real estate, so to speak, on the Google Display Network is available to all ad formats. So responsive ads are probably the best at taking advantage of as much of that as possible. But I really do always recommend that if clients have the assets available, they're using responsive ads, they're using image ads, and maybe they're even using still text ads on display to really just get the biggest audience possible. Then Ivana was talking about Gmail, which is another great example of that.
Cool. So we have another question here. We'll try to get through as many as we can. Should you use AdWords conversion tag or import conversions from analytics? My opinion here is most of our advertisers actually do just use the AdWords conversion tag that's available within the interface. In some instances in which you'd like to use analytics conversion tracking is if there are other signals that you want to track that's not available within AdWords. So a prime example would be engagement on site, whether it's, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe site duration might be one of it, or perhaps
you can do session duration and pages, so pages viewed, minimum number.
Exactly. And sometimes this is more helpful for customers where you can't actually track a conversion action. So for example, if you run a website where, users aren't going to fill out a form or they're not going to buy anything, but you do want to go after people who engage with the website frequently, AdWords conversion tracking might not make as much sense as if you were using analytics tracking, where you look at site engagement rather than a conversion action like a purchase or form fill out.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great answer. I do think the heart of it is you want to be tracking. So if you're using either the AdWords conversion tag or the analytics tag, you're going to get most of the same data, and it's going to be very, very powerful. Like you said, analytics, especially when you think about remarketing, it does have some capabilities that, that AdWords tag doesn't have. But ultimately, especially for conversion tracking, the most important thing is that you're doing it.
Yep. And a really quick plug here too, if you're putting in your code for the very first time, make sure you read the instructions. There are very specific instructions about where to place that code exactly. It might have to be within your head tag or within the body tag, depending on which code you're using. So make sure you're paying attention to that. The other thing also is there's a great plugin you can use. It's a Chrome extension called Tag Assistant. So if you download that within Chrome, it's a great way to just spot check, and we'll let you know if there are any issues with your tag implementation.
Yeah.
Cool. So I think we might just have time here for, there's a question here from Antonio. I have clients in the legal field who can't build audience lists due to AdWords policies and privacy related to the services they offer. Any ideas on how to get customer data in other ways?
Yeah, and I think, to start off the answer for that, I think what you actually need to think about if you're in an industry where you're not able, for legal reasons or policy reasons, to collect that customer data is what are other targeting capabilities that can give you, the best strategy and the best ability to find qualified clients possible. And so often with legal, search really is the place to start, maybe with call-only ads. I know for those of you who do work in the legal field and are listening, you're probably very familiar with what I'm talking about. Those are going to be mobile ads where your phone number is basically the headline. You can click in and call. If you do want to move beyond that, though, we basically have a couple types of targeting on display. So we have our behavioral, or I think of it as our audience targeting, and that's most of what we've been talking about here. So thinking about who your user is. But we also do have some very powerful contextual targeting available, and that's going to be about where they are. And I actually think for something that's a very immediate need, like in the legal field, that can often be the best way to go. So showing on, sites that are directly related to legal, you can still choose the website placements that you want to show on, even if you're not able to use that type of audience data. But definitely feel free to jump in if you have anything else on that.
I think the only other thing I wanted to note, sort of to sum it up, with certain service offerings, whether that be legal, whether that be healthcare, we do have some pretty strict privacy policies. And again, at the end of the day, we do, as much as we want to retarget, these users, we do also want to respect their privacy. So as a company, we've determined that there are certain categories that we just cannot allow that sort of following the user around. So to Marco's point, I think there are a lot of creative solutions that you can leverage, but in terms of building out very specific audience lists to re-engage with these users, there isn't exactly a workaround for that.
Yep. Okay. So I think that is all the questions that we have time for. But really want to thank everyone for tuning in. It was an absolute pleasure.
Yes.
And please remember to watch our next Hangout next Thursday. And there you'll be talking about re-engagement, and you'll start to think about, you have this audience data, you have all this information. How do you use it to really put together the best strategy to re-engage that audience?
Exactly. So we'll leave it for the team then. But until then, thank you again so much for tuning in here. We really, truly hope this was helpful. And best of luck to you as you build out your audience strategies. We'll see you next time.